Hi everyone and welcome to Hit the Apex this week. It's the day of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. We're sorry that we're bringing this one to you a little bit later than normal, just a few scheduling issues, but it means we can talk directly about the race itself today because it's a few hours away. The Azerbaijan Grand Prix, chaotic race it was last year. We're expecting similar chaos again this year. I'm Jawad, joined by Baden as always. And yeah, so round 4 of the championship. It was a wacky race last year. It's all set for another wacky race, hopefully this afternoon or this evening. A lot of wind expected, which has caused havoc during qualifying and whatnot, and cooler temperatures, and even a bit of rain, they're saying, is around in the air too.
It's definitely that time shift a couple of months earlier seems to have made all the difference, and the proof will be in the race itself, whether some of those cars, aerodynamically, the efficiency they can cut through that air. But as it is, I've seen already some, as I guess I've seen the first couple of seasons here, a lot of cars having some misadventures, making full use of those runoffs. So it definitely is one of those circuits that's quite unforgiving, and they'll be found out pretty quickly come the race if the variables have any say.
Yeah, quite a lengthy circuit and unforgiving, as you say, as well. And last year, I guess you could say the race still vivid, a lot of epic overtaking because this circuit actually encourages overtaking on that long back straight. But then also there was championship ramifications too, if you remember, with Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton coming together, a bit of fisticuffs there between the two, and that was talked about after the race for quite some time.
You could argue that was almost the turning point. As far as the ultimate season, it took a while for Hamilton to wrest that lead back, but that was the point where it seemed as though he gained the oft-quoted psychological advantage. Yeah,
well, that's where the chinks in the Ferrari armour actually started to show, and then eventually we know what became of that. But in the end, that race was won by Daniel Ricciardo. Well, more like robbed again. He calls himself the race robber these days. Robin Hood, yeah, stealing from the rich, giving to the poor. Not that Red Bull poor or anything.
Yeah, it's the ultimate paradox, I think. Yeah.
Well, giving to, I guess, his own account of wins, which is pretty poor considering how talented a driver he is anyway. Could he go back-to-back this year? That's the question. He's the reigning race winner, of course, from last time out in China too. Red Bull did indicate pre-race that they're going to struggle on the straights, but what we've seen through practice and then certainly qualifying where, they're starting 4th and 5th, led by Daniel Ricciardo, is that they are definitely in this race with the Ferraris and the Mercedes guys. It's going to be a three-way battle once again. So, it's going to be interesting to see if Ricciardo can get the jump again.
Yeah, for Red Bull, I guess it's all around. They've got one car first across the line, but it hasn't been both for reasons which are quite obvious. We've seen Max Verstappen every race. He's had some sort of little catastrophe there, and even on Friday another one, but that was probably the best time to have that setback, and he's bounced back well, 4th and 5th for both of those cars. And who knows with Mercedes, they look like they've just been a little bit adrift. They got it together obviously for 2nd and 3rd, which was a good effort all things considered. So if Red Bull finally get a good weekend, they'll be quietly hoping for a double podium, and who knows if they can capitalise even another victory.
Yeah, that's probably the question on everyone's minds, is can Red Bull get up there? But going back to Mercedes, as you say, 2nd and 3rd, Lewis Hamilton starting on the front row alongside Sebastian Vettel. Lewis, a lot of talk about him over the week, the fact that he's started this season winless, as has Mercedes too. They haven't won a race, of course, and coming to Baku, it's a circuit that Hamilton's struggled at ever since we came here for the first time since in 2016. He's not been on the podium, let alone won a race.
You could argue last year is a bit harshly done by.
Last year, harshly done by, but that just, talk about the luck that he's had here. It's not been great, and for him to try and break his winless drought at this circuit, considering the luck he's had previously, it's looking a bit unlikely, but he's starting from 2nd. It's a good place to start, and if he can get up there into turn 1, there is a chance. And important to point out too that he's on a 28 race point scoring streak too since 2016 in Japan. We remember in Malaysia that was the last time he retired or didn't even score a point. So He's got that run of consistency behind him, and that's the record now in Formula One for longest amount of races with points scored. So Mercedes have been strong here in the past. So Nico Rosberg won here in 2016, Valtteri Bottas on the podium last year. So is it time for Hamilton to establish a bit of himself here at Baku?
Oh, there's no time like the present as far as the campaign goes. It's really quite ironic that there's talk that he feels... or not doesn't feel, but the perception is that he's adrift since he's not having the success of previous seasons, yet only 9 points behind Vettel, so a victory here and he could find himself atop the standings. But as far as that momentum goes, he's such a driver who is, really getting the victory there. It's all the confidence that he needs, and then suddenly he's a completely different character. So it will be very interesting to see if he can pull something out of the bag. And again, you feel if Ferrari gets the job done here, then really a lot of questions will be asked about what he's got for the rest of the season.
Exactly, and Ferrari actually yet to win a race in Baku. Vettel was on the podium in 2016, and then we all know what happened last year with him. Verstappen, you touched on him before, under the spotlight still for his antics in China. Will he have learned his lesson? And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we said giving away the race win and watching his teammate go on to win that race, surely that would have meant that something clicked in him. It's not like he's going to change his style because it's the style that everyone or most people actually enjoy watching, but the fact that he needs to polish it a bit, hone in onto it, and he could be a very lethal racer, as in not taking people out, but getting the job done like we see his teammate do as far as overtakes.
I think we've already seen as far as the first few races, that's very much the pattern. That the other half is maybe a bit shinier, and based on last season, improvements being made. So you think if that's an indication, then lessons are being learned over time.
Yeah, so this race will be a key indicator to see where Verstappen's at, especially because of the crazy nature of it. Can he control himself? That's going to be the interesting thing. What's going to be important too is, will we see the race bring the back markers forward? We expect a lot of safety cars, of course, and stuff like that. So can we see back markers come forward? Lance Stroll last year was on the podium, a surprise podium for Williams, the only one and only highlight in his career to date. Even though Williams were in a better place last year, could we see points on offer for the likes of Sauber, Toro Rosso, Williams this year because they are so far back from the midfield?
I don't know about the first and the third. Their Toro Rosso might be a bit absent on their space expedition after what happened in qualifying there. We saw some very interesting antics between Brendan Hartley and Pierre Gasly.
A bit of problems that Hartley encountered, and then Gasly just coming out of nowhere and getting caught in there. So
I think they do show the pace, though, on a serious note, Toro Rosso, and probably Gasly was on track for a Q2 run there, but that obviously sabotaged that bid. So if they get a good strategy, again, seen like with a Red Bull, they're dynamite when they've got the right tyres on, exploiting what is almost an inevitable safety car in this instance. So out of those three, they've got to be the legitimate candidates. And Sauber, we saw Charles Leclerc, wasn't it? Was he 13th, 14th?
Yeah, so he'll probably get elevated with the Nico Hülkenberg grid penalty too. And Williams, they're starting just inside the top 10 with 10th and 11th because of Nico Hülkenberg's 5-place grid penalty. So Lance Stroll leading his teammate there, Sergei Sirotkin. But Force India's both in the top 10 too for the first time this season, and I guess the big question mark is whether they're going to come to blows, as we've seen both Sergio Perez and Esteban Ocon have in the past.
Well,
and
this time last year,
double podium went begging. Perez was on the podium here a couple of years ago, so he knows how to go well around here. But they're going to have big points on offer, but they just got to not stuff it up like they did like this time last year.
I think I know what's at stake. Certainly that talk off track that they're quite delicately poised with the finances, so every point is gold, especially when you see Sauber's already racked up a few points there, and I guess Toro Rosso got that healthy bag courtesy of Gasly at Bahrain, so they'll be looking if they can scratch maybe, an 8th and a ninth or a little bit higher. That's going to be really something to build on, and if they can get the funds coming through the door, they might come online a bit more as the season heads back to Europe.
Yeah, so that's going to be quite crucial, and point out again that Williams are the only team that haven't scored a point yet in 2018, so could they get themselves on the board or not? It's truly going to be an unpredictable race. Hard to put a finger on who's going to win this one, but a safe bet you'd have to say Sebastian Vettel from pole position if all goes well, but it could be anyone at this rate.
Yeah, I think for the sake of variety, it's always good to see somebody different up there, and one guy who's been really quite mercurial and probably almost a battering ram to date is Valtteri Bottas, and you could argue very unlucky at China, and he had of course now those back-to-back second places, so it's one where if he can get off the line well and show Hamilton that he really is lifting his game this year, then I think he'll be someone to really talk about legitimately.
Yeah, well, we've talked about him as being a better defensive driver than he is on the attack. So if he gets ahead, and he's on the right strategy, he could, very well win the race, and perhaps
last year how well he did that final.
Against Lance Stroll,
final straight pass on him.
Yeah, on Lance Stroll to pinch second last year. So Bottas, perhaps his clean style might be better suited to a circuit like this, where making less mistakes will be more rewarding.
And they talk about the way the circuit's got a lot of bumps and abrasions. It tends to suit those Scandinavian Nordic drivers more so than the rest.
Don't know about
the rallycross style.
Oh, well, yeah, the rallycross style and the wind, I guess, is going to be a big factor too. So just try not to get blown off track, I guess, that way. So, yeah, truly an exciting race to look forward to. And, yeah, we won't be too far off wrapping it all up come a few days' time. So let's go straight into the digest then for this week, or the past week, let's say. A lot to do with Williams, we have to say. And Williams released a bit of data regarding their revenue from last year as well. They almost had £9 million up from 2016. And this is all said despite the fact where they are this season. Now, they've had that influx of cash. They've got 2 pay drivers on board. Sergei Sirotkin, of course, with his backing from SMP Racing. And, of course, Lance Stroll, we know the connection that he has. So why then are, they struggling? And this could lead into the second thing we're going to talk about, is that Felipe Massa, the ex-driver for Williams, has come out and said that Williams are paying the price for putting money first and not putting an experienced driver in the car to be able to fine-tune and develop this car. So you've got Lance Stroll, who's in his sophomore season, I guess not really having much of an impact last year, the podium in Baku, perhaps, just being in the right place at the right time. But then Sergei Sirotkin, straight out of F2, the lack of experience there, not really helping them this year, and that's what Felipe Massa says, that, putting money first has hurt them.
Well, for sure, if they had me in the car, we would be maybe 6th or 7th, but they got rid of me and they do what they do. We're going to say on an honest note, Crimea River for Williams. We talked about this coming into the season, and they had Robert Kubica, so there you could argue he would make little difference if the car's that woeful, but just as far as having that central driver, someone revered, that he'd be able to build something that they can work with, and at the point they are now, listless, rudderless, whatever you want to describe it as.
Yeah, well, you'd have a good reference. That's what Massa was last year, but then Stroll, in his hubris, I guess, was saying that, Massa wasn't much of a reference for me in the first place. So, I guess it's, with such vitriol, guys like Stroll was coming out and saying, and even recently when Massa made these comments, Stroll said that that's absolute bollocks, and it's like, well, it is true when you look at it on paper. You guys haven't really progressed with the car, and I guess they unlocked a little bit this weekend with those engine modes coming towards them with the Mercedes. Courtesy of Mercedes. So Williams on their side, they haven't really made any progress, and of course they said after qualifying, this is not us turning a corner, but just helped by that engine mode. So it's like, all right, when are you going to turn a corner if you're going to do it this season? So I guess in the situation that they are, because they can't do anything about it, there's going to be a war of words. But, you know, I think people have got to put their hands up and say, all right, we made the mistake. And someone like Stroll, who doesn't really have a lot of credentials behind him just yet, for him to come out and say, oh, Massa was no reference for me, it's kind of just like, all right, kid, we know what you're here for, sort of thing. So, yeah, really hard to take what they say a bit seriously. But it is a shame for a team like Williams with so much prestige and history behind them.
I'll say a lot if this situation remains for the balance of the season, and they've got that real decision to make between continuing with the funded drivers or taking on a Robert Kubica if he's still interested in the seat, much less what the competitive prospects will be, and they again refuse his services. That'll be a point where a lot of people might just decide, oh, well, they've sunk their own ship and there's not much else we can do to sympathise with them.
It depends, you know, what their future is going to look like. They're going to have to sort that out before they can, make decisions on the driver front, because, yeah, it just looks like, yeah, sure, they've got this revenue coming in now, and it's up from what they were a couple of years ago, but the fact is it amounts to nothing if you're not going to be able to make something out of it. Like, let's use the classic Toyota example from when they came into F1. Had a lot of money behind them, but didn't know what to do with it, sort of thing. So that's, I guess, going to be the key thing for Williams going into the future. Moving it on, though, FIA to present a new pit stop solution to the teams. I guess we've had a lot of unsafe releases this year, more so than normal. So I guess the classic reactionary thing to do is, right, let's try and investigate what we can do to make pit stop safer. So there has been discussion about, I guess, limiting the amount of engineers or pit crew that they have on site. You know, we look at other categories where they have only 2 people doing it, for example. So, do we really need to do it, or is it just teams getting a bit too eager?
In true F1 fashion, they'll slap something on haphazardly and it will be even more disastrous. Like again, referring back to whatever that qualifying system was they used for Melbourne a few years ago that no one will ever speak of again. But we come to pit lane. Imagine when we have two personnel servicing a car. It'll be back to what it was in the formative days of pit stops. It'll be 30 seconds, almost like a supercar's pit stop, that kind of time, 20 seconds. So that's got to be a bit comical. You can just see they're pushing the edge. It's come down such a fine line in the post refueling. You're down from 5 or 4 seconds now to almost sub 2s for the very best of them, and it's just at a point where I guess bottoming out. But they can only be so perfect, and they can't go and just say, oh well, we've had this non-recurring incident like Ferrari had at Bahrain, so we've got to go and put some 5-second window on or whatever it is to slow it down.
Exactly. So it's just, they can easily just refine the current product that they have, and more training, I guess, for the mechanics and whatnot as well. So it's not an easy job at all. Got to be pretty fit to do it, especially with those tyres weighing the amount that they do. So no need to change it, I guess, unless it continuously creates danger and whatnot, and we get more people seriously injured. As we did with that Ferrari mechanic in Bahrain. I guess, you could call it just a one-off, but, as these things happen, they always have to investigate and whatnot. So, moving it on anyway, and there's some news out of McLaren too earlier in the week about a technical reshuffle in-house with Tim Goss, the long-time technical director, being shown the door. And I guess this is all amidst a disappointing start to 2018 where there was, let's say, not a lot of promise, but there was some promise that they would be a bit higher up than they were now that they've got Red Bull as a reference to use with their Renault power units. All those claims about we've got the best chassis or the second best chassis, yet that hasn't come to fruition. So now it's time for heads with no more Honda to blame. I guess the heads are going to start to roll in-house when things are not going to go the right way. And probably this is for the best thing too.
It's just deliciously poetic to think that everyone really came into this season thinking, whack a Renault in there and they're suddenly going to be propelled to, best of the rest behind Mercedes and Ferrari. And they're right about where people who are being realistic would have had them, to be fourth in the constructors, and Fernando Alonso again working his magic. It's by no means farcical, but McLaren, I guess, in the terms of what its own expectations are, they want to be back to that level where they were in the pre-Honda days, and they're still a fair way adrift. And we've seen Red Bull, they're legitimately now a title contender, you could say, much less just nibbling away for maybe the minor placings. So for McLaren, they've realised that that notion that their chassis over the past 3 seasons perhaps was rivaling a Mercedes for all of its dominance. It's not quite the case, and those at the forefront, like a Tim Goss, they're the ones who have got to walk the plank, and I guess it won't be far away. And then the rest, like dare we say Peter Prodromo, will also be under the gun if it doesn't get its act together, with the talk at Barcelona of a major upgrade coming, and that's the one that's really going to have to find them maybe half a second.
Well, yeah, we can understand when they have issues at the start of the season and pre-season, obviously with a new engine coming in and trying to get the packaging and all that right. But when you're a few races in, then you've got to be able to fine-tune, and as you say, Barcelona will be the real telling point when they get that upgrades package. And just reading comments online and whatnot as well from fans, and talking about perhaps it's Eric Boullier from management level that things need to change and whatnot. So this is going to be a really trying season, I guess, and Fernando Alonso, as you say, doing the best he can. Even talk of him potentially leaving at the end of the season with things not being up to his satisfaction, despite, I guess, lobbying for that engine change from Honda to Renault. So it'll be a long season ahead if things don't start going their way. So quickly moving it on to MotoGP last weekend, Marc Marquez made it his 6th consecutive win in Austin, so still the mayor of Austin there from Vinales and Iannone. It was a great race. He started with a penalty and still came back to win, so it just goes to show you how amazing the kid is at that track. And then Jenson Button being confirmed for the WEC Super Season, which was good to hear too. So he'll be joining SMP Racing in LMP1 from the 24 Hours of Le Mans onwards, so he won't be doing Spa next weekend, and he'll be teammates with ex-IndyCar racer Mikhail Aleshin and Vitaly Petrov, the ex-F1 driver. So another F1 world champion on the grid for WEC and for Le Mans.
Yeah, teaming up with the Russians there, so it'll be an interesting combination. But you can see it's just a great asset for WEC alongside Alonso, and the way the season's spread just really does open it up to any other candidates that might be having a look. They'll all be quite eager to see how Alonso fares in coming days. He's got, 9 active weekends out of the next 11, I believe, encompassing between Belgium and Le Mans, and 6 or 7 F1 races as well. So that'll be quite a telling period to see where he emerges from it. And for Jenson Button, he's been doing the Super GT, so he's been keeping active, so he shouldn't be too scratchy, but at the same time be realistic for his expectations. Probably not going to be at the point in that machinery to take on, say, a Toyota for Alonso.
Yeah, well, especially in those 6-hour races, but come Le Mans when, 24 hours, a lot of reliability problems. If Toyota's so-called reliability trends continue, then we might as well see one of those privateer LMP guys fighting at the sharp end for the win at Le Mans. So we look forward to that. And as you say, in the coming days, actually next week, we'll have the 6 hours of Spa and Alonso's first WEC race as well, which will be so exciting. We'll preview that for you then. But let's talk about supercars. Last weekend, they were at Phillip Island. Some key talking points to take away from the weekend after their 4th round of the championship. And Scott McLaughlin, king of the island, you could say. He clean swept the weekend. He's had 8 wins there in total now in his short career. So out of 18 wins that he's had in his career, 8 of them have come at Phillip Island. I think he's had about 6 pole positions in a row there as well, and now he's got the title lead too. So great weekend for him, and a lot of people writing off Shell V Power Racing, Dick Johnson, Team Penske, because they've got outdated machinery. But McLaughlin, he just came back and proved the doubters wrong.
No, the outlook's so much brighter, particularly for Ford across the coming 12 months. They've just got that launching pad of, I guess, working towards Mustang, but sending off the Falcon on a positive note and throw everything towards just the upgrade circuit dependency. Of course, we saw the first 3 events. It was very much playing towards Holden and its composite panels on that new machinery, which has certainly been quite polarising, but the parity seems to be coming back into the equation. And for Ford, it was a great weekend, and for Nissan, a really timely boost for both Rick Kelly and even Michael Caruso right up there. So that'll who knows whether it will sway its own call for Nissan on its own long-term future.
Well, yeah, so double podium for Rick Kelly on the weekend and for Nissan too. So, and it was his milestone weekend as well because it was his 500th race on Saturday. So getting 2 podiums out of the weekend was great. And you said Caruso was up there too, which was good to see. So, whether that'll influence Nissan's decision for the future remains to be seen. It's good actually to see Kelly on Sunday a little disappointed with finishing on the podium because he thought that they had the potential to win the race, but then I think just they were outplayed by through the strategy by the DGR Team Penske guys and, of course, Erebus Motorsport as well, who were up there with David Reynolds. And going on to the next point, Reynolds was the leading Holden, you could say, for the whole weekend. He finished second on Sunday and then had that battle with Scott McLaughlin in which the Kiwi won. So, Reynolds very much that dark horse in this championship. He's stringing together consistent results, even if he's not on the podium all the time. But he's had the best start to a season in his career and sitting P2 in the championship as well. If he keeps edging away, get a podium every race or every weekend or, get at least a win every 2 rounds, he could be up there come the end of the year. And especially if he has a solid enduro campaign like he did last year too. We know that he's going to be paired with Luke Youlden again. So, David Reynolds, if you want to put money on someone for this championship, you could go for Reynolds as an outsider.
No coincidence that Erebus are now up there every weekend, almost behind the Triple Eights, and you see they're off the pace. They're the next in the queue, and I think really ever since that Bathurst victory, they've been galvanised, and they look like they really belong at the front there. Davey Reynolds starting to show some resilience as well after that criticism he copped from Adelaide, and he was a lot more on it, even though he lost out ultimately to McLaughlin on the Sunday race at Phillip Island. He really dug his heels in, and as well, it's worth noting, and Anton De Pasquale, he really, I guess Reynolds took a leaf out of his book earlier in the weekend, and he's showing that he's rapidly getting up to scratch, and maybe the results weren't befitting of the kind of drive that he put in, and it could be sooner than later that he's also going to be a top 10 runner. Yeah,
well, they're saying that, Anton's going to really have an influence on the way the championship goes for Reynolds too, as far as developing that number 9 car, and it was great to see him, young De Pasquale, in the top 10 on both races, I believe. So, we could see both cars up there soon. And De Pasquale, if you guys remember, following his early career, he went off to Europe a few years ago to do single-seaters and try to get into F1, and unfortunately that didn't pan out. They didn't have the budget to do it. He came back to Australia and went straight to touring car racing, and now he's in his first season with the supercars. So, hopefully he makes a good career out of it here in Australia in supercar racing, and he's in his rookie season, he's off to a pretty good start, and having Reynolds as that benchmark, of course. Now we talk about Williams with not having good references and benchmarks and whatnot. He's got a good benchmark in Reynolds and a good reference point, and it's really helping De Pasquale. And in turn, De Pasquale's data and references are helping Reynolds too in his title bid.
Well, good to see De Pasquale. He's not one of those guys making up the numbers, which supercars from time to time gets those who are purely there for the finances, just like Formula One. And then for David Reynolds, I don't think he's going to fly the coupe. He's certainly looking quite loyal to Erebus, but he's fast putting himself on the map as a contender, who knows, for say a Penske berth or a Triple Eight berth maybe in a year or so when Jamie Whincup and Craig Lowndes decide to scale back their commitments. So he's certainly put himself to the front of that queue as hottest property. Yeah, well,
the more he does, the better. And it was unfortunate the way he was dismissed from Tickford a couple of years ago. But, he's found a home at Erebus, and he's building this team around him to take him to, what is supposed to be the top of the sport. And that'll be great to see if they do that. But speaking of Tickford, his former team, they're still a way off, and it's just, when DGR Team Penske come out and have a great weekend like they did, clean sweeping both races, to see a 4-car team with 4 cars, 4 really great drivers as well, just nowhere near the front. It's just really, you got to ask the questions. And Chaz Mostert, again, the leading light for the team. He finished 5th and 8th in both the races. Mark Winterbottom, it was his 200th round over that weekend as well, and he, I think, got one top 10 and then finished outside the top 10 for the other race. There was struggles for Cam Waters, Richie Stanaway coming to blows with Simone Di Silvestro as well. So, you got to say, are they just hoping that, they're just struggling with the tyres, I guess, the 2016 compound tyres that they're using on these cars, and you got to wonder whether they're just hoping to hold out for next year where they get a brand new car, new development, and go from there.
At this point, it's hard to see them buying into the championship picture, and it again asks the question of a Mark Winterbottom. Perhaps he's reaching that point where his best days are behind him, just as maybe a Craig Lowndes has had the question put to him in the past couple of seasons. So next year really will be crucial for Winterbottom. With the new machinery, he can really show that he still has what it takes, because Chaz Mostert's already established himself in the past 12 to 18 months since he's found that confidence post Bathurst 2015 with that crash. He's going to be the future of the outfit moving into the Mustang era.
Well, if Chaz decides to stay there as well, a bit of chatter around that he could potentially be taken up by DGR Team Penske in the future as well.
He did make his debut there.
With Dick Johnson in 2013. So, and Winterbottom, of course, is off contract too at the end of the year. So whether he decides to be retained by Tickford, of course, or do they decide to go for a new driver? So a lot of silly season discussion to be had, I guess, later in the season for supercars.
Hard
too.
To believe we're only about a third of the way in.
Yeah, exactly. So to see what the grid will look like for next year, it'll be quite intriguing. And quickly, just to wrap it up, then Jamie Whincup, costly weekend, and you already mentioned it that Triple Eight were, I guess, second best to Erebus over the weekend as far as the best Holden team is concerned, and I guess just finger troubles for Whincup. A penalty on Saturday for having the pit limiter off as he was coming out of pit lane before he reached the designated cone, and he was penalised heavily for that. A drive-through penalty which was applied as a 38-second time penalty post-race, and then just in general not having any pace at all. And all three cars were just way back. We saw Shane Van Gisbergen and Craig Lowndes having a bit of a tussle in the bottom part of the top 10 on the Saturday race, but I guess
they were top 5 Saturday.
They were top
5.
Okay,
it was, but Sunday they were well adrift, weren't they?
Yeah, Sunday they were well adrift, but then where they had their little tussle as well together, and Craig's like, "I'll let him pass. I was going to let him pass, so tell him to stop trying to drill me here."
Yeah, you could see a little bit of friction there, and hopefully with Craig Lowndes looks a lot more as though he's rediscovered that mojo this season after that combination with the Irish McGregor, his engineer, following Ludo Lacroix's departure. So it's good to see that he's looking like he's competitive as ever, and clearly still wants to show after, especially that victory at Tasmania, that he still has hopes to be more than just the third wheel, essentially, inside that garage.
Exactly. Well, yeah, he's back up there. He's got that mojo again, so surely we'll see more of Craig Lowndes as the season goes on. And Enduro time, as you always say, that could be a good time of the year for him as well. Yeah,
he's the master when it comes around to that Sandown, Bathurst and Gold Coast, but hopefully a little bit more, and he's still within, I guess, reaching distance.
Well, he's sitting third or fourth in the championship at the moment, so
yeah, it's quite
encouraging
an
to see.
Table when you look at it. There's a lot of guys there who maybe haven't been top 3 every race, but they've been consistent.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll conclude then the podcast with our sporting moments of the week, and it's hard to go past the tradition that is Anzac Day footy across, both the Aussie rules and also rugby league as well. And I'm guessing, you'll be still pretty buoyed by the victory on Wednesday for Collingwood over Essendon. Essendon a bit hapless, you could say, inconsistent, just looked rudderless. They looked like Williams in football trim, you could say.
As Mark Robinson referred to them as crabs on the
crabs,
Wednesday evening,
scuttling around, like crabs. And Brendan Goddard was hilarious to see him just have a verbal spray at his team. Even though he's not even the captain of the team, it was just for 1 year when all the good players were banned. So
he hasn't realised that was only because the better players were kind of unable to.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just like he's the last man standing to be the captain. But yeah, no, well played by Collingwood that day, and not a lot of hope, I guess, for the season at large, but they're showing improvement, which you'll be really pleased with.
Yeah, small steps. Always the the drawing board, Collingwood, as far as any kind of criticism. They're the first to come under fire, and amusingly, whenever they find form, it seems fairly quiet, so it's probably not a bad position to be in. And then,
well, you just want to be quietly achieving. That's the best thing to do. And then suddenly, there you go, top 8 at the end of the year.
Fly under the radar.
Yeah.
And also the way this podcast has fallen, the next game and the schedule, since it was falling on the day of Anzac being this year on a Wednesday, short turnaround, so a few short hours taking on the last year's premiers Richmond. So it'll be interesting to see how
I
they
thought
back
the
up.
round started on Wednesday, but the game on Wednesday was the end of the previous round. It's the work differently to rugby league, where it's like Wednesday's the start of Anzac round 8, and we saw, of course, St George play the Roosters. They ended up beating them controversially with a try decision, and then, of course, Storm decimating the Warriors too, which was a good game to watch as well in the evening. So we had some great footy to watch, and yeah, hopefully we get a good race this evening as well to cap up what's been a good week for sport.
Yeah, and I guess as well, the quirks of the scheduling. Now, we thought it was going to be the 11 o'clock start for the first time, but that comes in a fortnight at Spain, so we get the traditional 10 or 10 p.m. lights out for us Australians, and then it will move to the more US-friendly times thereafter, so we'll see how that one goes, but there's a lot of intrigue as ever, and based on the last couple of seasons, there's sure to be some major talking points next week.
Yeah, exactly, and we look forward to being back to our normal time as well next week for the podcast, and wrapping up what should be another great race, hopefully this evening. So thanks for joining us on this late notice, and we'll see you guys next time.
Till then.